Hello Bits and Bones, my name is Slaidey V, and welcome to my channel where I make content while I talk about content and sometimes just talk. Recently I've been thinking about a novel I read within the last couple months called The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads, and my previous review of it was this, and I will paste it and keep it on the screen for a little while for you to read it in case you're curious. But I'm going to basically go over what I already said with new points because I hadn't hit exactly what I wanted to with understanding my own reception of the novel. After my initial review, I later found in several other book reviewers' videos that there seemed to be a general consensus that it was a good book, but it wasn't a good book. A lot of people DNF'd it, a lot of people found it boring. Initially, I thought this lackluster performance, based on the premise, the hype, and the marketing of the book, it seemed to have simply been mismarketed. And that's the strange thing that I want to explore today. Please note that this is not malicious commentary in any way. As always, I'm simply here to talk about what I thought about a piece of content, explore its depths, and suggest what I think could have been a little different. I'm not fixing the Immortalists, I'm not good enough of a creator for that, I'm simply tweaking it. So in case you don't know what The Immortalists is about, here's the premise as written on the book. If you knew the date of your death, how would you live your life? It's 1969 in New York City's Lower East Side, and word has spread of the arrival of a mystical woman, a traveling psychic who claims to be able to tell anyone the day they will die. The Gold Children, 4 adolescents on the cusp of self-awareness, sneak out to hear their fortunes. Prophecies inform their next 5 decades. Golden Boy Simon escapes to the West Coast searching for love in 80s San Francisco. Dreamy Klara becomes a Las Vegas magician obsessed with blurring reality and fantasy. Eldest son Daniel seeks security as an army doctor post 9/11, and bookish Varya throws herself into longevity research where she tests the boundaries between science and immortality. A sweeping novel of remarkable ambition and depth, The Immortalists probes the line between destiny and choice, reality and illusion, this world and the next. It is a deeply moving testament to the power of story, the nature of belief, and the unrelenting power of familial bonds. End quote. So, as you can imagine, a lot of people went into this expecting more of a psychological thriller and were disappointed from that because, well, how many times has prophesizing your own death ever been a casual, meandering topic? Well, in The Immortalists, it kind of is. As the dates given to the Gold family are all from their young adulthood onward, there's no immediate pull to action. Everyone is given at least a decade to live their best life, assuming they believe in their death day, so there's a lack of sympathy when they do eventually die. That said, Simon's death is still a tragedy, but it comes off as a timepiece of a young gay man in San Francisco in the 80s, rather than Simon, a brother of 3 other siblings all inexplicably linked to a predetermined fate. Simon was a deeply fleshed out and sympathetic character study, but as soon as his chapter came to a close, immediately our reader brain went, okay, what's Klara going to do now that the death dates seem real? As excited as I was as a reader to meet Klara, who seemed the most interesting of the bunch, her story, despite her own supernatural inclinations and bold personality, turned into something more mundane than a sister hell-bent on cheating death, which is kind of what we all were looking for. We instead come to see her as a mentally ill wannabe magician with insurmountable depression despite her given opportunities. It made me kind of not like her because it turned the whimsical premise of knowing your death day and used it to disgust us with Klara's supernatural beliefs as just a side effect of her depression. It becomes, in hindsight, very sad and tragic, but in time, as a reader, you're praying for something more. When Klara hears knocking and feels presences, we want to believe that's real, not just a misdirect. But it is a misdirect. I think in and of itself, pausing on Klara, Benjamin, the writer, took an interesting and respectable route with the narrative. I see now that the fortune teller and the death days were simply a catalyst, a means for conversation about the characters, who they become, and why. But, as a reader, as much as the writing is deep and thought-provoking, we feel like we're being led somewhere, to something more concrete and otherworldly. Simon was a throwaway, Klara was a mystery, and then we get Daniel. And Daniel is someone who shouldn't, personality-wise, believe in the death days because time is ticking and, well, he dies. He fulfills his own prophecy just like the siblings before him. So that's what it's all been about, you tell yourself at the end of Daniel's section. You figured it out. This was a character piece driven adult novel about the ways we fulfill our own prophecies for better or for worse. It was never really supernatural at all, it was just a matter of one's beliefs. This is where the book description, I think, lies a little bit. To re-say the quote, it says that it probes the line between destiny and choice, reality and illusion, this world and the next. As we come to realize the novel for what it is, we see there was no destiny or choice. Reality is only an illusion to the unstable, and this is the only world there is because nothing supernatural ever happened. It's all just internal speculation by the characters and enacted by their mental illnesses. Be that schizophrenia, depression, repression, possessiveness, privilege, I don't know. Like, there's a lot going on. I can see where a lot of people going into this book went wrong in assuming that there would be more spectacular things in this book. As much of the description is accurate, it's also marketing to a different demographic. If you knew the date of your death, how would you live your life? Is a pretty punchy first line for marketing a book that mostly wants to chat about life by using character pieces. It's not an adventure or a race for time, but it was presented that way. The cover of The Immortalists also didn't help the situation. With book covers getting more and more aesthetic, it's hard to tell their genre anymore. There's a great video on that topic up in the card at the top of this video if you want to go check it out. I was really interested to hear what he had to say about how covers for books have changed over the generation, specifically in the horror genre, but we're not talking about that at the moment. Just in case you're intrigued, go check it out. The title of The Immortalists even lent to something younger and wilder of a story. If this cover and title is all you had, what would you think it's about? Based on book marketing within the last decade, I'd guess it's a young adult supernatural thriller about a group of superpowered individuals doing something? Cheating death? Now, to speak of the pacing of the novel. You're sitting there after finishing Daniel's story, satisfied with the revelation you've had about what the story meant, why you've gone through all of this character development just to have them die, and then you realize there's still Varya left to read. The sections of the book weren't proportionate in an entirely appropriate way. Simon was a vehicle for us to learn of the Gold family and framed the time we're in historically. Klara was supposed to be our dive into the supernatural side of things in belief, but left us hanging. Get it? Daniel served as an arc of realization, because the older two siblings never believed in the prophecies, and yet he drove himself into fulfilling it for the sake of his family that he's already lost to it. So what does that leave for Varya then? But to entirely derail the narrative or boringly fall into it. Varya's section is the shortest, but also, in my opinion, the most pointless. As the most logical and distant of the bunch of gold children, will she live past her date because she's the only one who doesn't truly believe in it? Will this whole book have been a collection of characters with no common thread? Kind of. Varya's story isn't technically a feel-good ending for the sake of itself. Her story is a parallel and development of each of her siblings. From Simon to Varya, you get a completely different scale of personality, philosophy, and just a life in general. Simon lived bright and quick, and Varya lives dim and long. We end the novel, unlike the death of each of the parts and siblings before Varya, with her alive, with a renewed will to live. Although this all sounds good thematically, actually reading it felt like a total letdown. Not just because I'm some sadist that wanted as much death as possible, or because I don't genuinely enjoy the bits of thought and conversation about life and death I got from the Immortalists. It was because the marketing of the book, again, lied without technically lying. Here's the quote. It is a deeply moving testament to the power of story, the nature of belief, and the unrelenting pull of familial bonds. All the characters in the Immortalists felt real. They were real solid 3D people, and I applaud Benjamin for creating them. However, this book was not about the unrelenting pull of familial bonds. Sam ran away from his family and estranged himself to all of them but Klara. Klara stayed on the road and only rarely spoke to Daniel on the phone. Daniel put himself in the situation in which he died because he felt he was so cut off from his family as a middle-aged man, even though he still had Varya left. He felt that they'd been taken from him, not because Simon wanted to go be gay in San Fran, got AIDS and died, or that Klara was depressed and couldn't hold up ties, but because the fortune teller took them from him. That's how alone and without a family he felt. And then you've got Varya, who's been entirely absent from the whole book. as the one to end it, we've seen next to nothing of her because the family lived and died so far apart from one another. It just felt like the writing and the events in the book somehow kept getting farther and farther from the premise. Ending on Varya just felt odd, like it was starting over and getting to the end of what I'd been working towards at the same time. Chloe Benjamin is a lovely, punchy writer. I especially liked her line casually referring vaginas to cabbages, and why on earth would Simon, because he's gay, find them attractive? It's like, right, her style seems very pointed and deep, but the arc of the stories themselves, if you're looking at what happens rather than what's said or developed internally, the parts of the book feel very separate and uneventful. It feels like you're going from one sibling to the next, not melding one story inherently into the next, or the continuation of familial bonds. The only character that travels through the whole novel is Ruby, Clara's kid. As much as Ruby is some symbol for the future, her parts and the aspects of family throughout the book were so neglected I didn't meet the ending looking upon her as the culmination of everything with any sort of satisfaction. Basically, that's my long-winded explanation of why some revered Chloe Benjamin's work, The Immortalists, as a thought-provoking, mature glimpse into the human mind and the power of belief, and others found the whole thing segmented and boring, and I understood both sides. I know there's much better examples of how marketing has ruined a book's perception, and this is a very mild case of it, but I thought that it was very interesting because these sorts of things are usually a radical difference, and that's what brings such outrage out of fans. The Immortalists didn't do that, but at the same time, it did entirely miss the mark of who it was marketing to. There wouldn't be so many people, I think, that would have picked up the book in the first place had it not been based on the premise of something more of a supernatural thriller inherently. It's respectable the way that Benjamin decided to use the premise of a predestined death date for a family, but at the same time, as a reader, you're always sitting there waiting for something more because that's what you've been given through all other iterations of this premise. If anything, I don't think the typing on the back of the book was necessarily the biggest fault here, even though I did fixate on the quotes that marvel at how revolutionary it was in different aspects, which I didn't entirely agree with. I think it was more the fact that it sensationalized the hierarchy of writing that we would expect from this product. When, if it is a truly adult book that is reliant on time character pieces to more engage with the reader than to actually tell a story that is a full culmination of a plot or whatever, then I think it probably should have pulled back a little bit. If you are an adult book, you don't have to overdo yourself. The audience will find you if you're good enough, I believe. As much as we live in a world of hype nowadays, there are certain audiences and markets that definitely live within their own niche and promote within themselves. And this probably would have done a lot better at book circles of people that read books every week and share thoughts about all the parts that they like or didn't like, how they related to different things. When you're reading in a book circle and you're actively trying to interact with the text yourself, write down how you felt and what you think about things so then you can go to a group and all discuss it from your various perspectives and interact with it on a more communal way. That is where I think this definitely would have excelled. When people brought it home and thought that they were going to sort of have a culmination story that fulfilled them or took their breath away because of how amazing the description at the back of the book said it was, that's where I think it fell a little flat because they weren't getting whisked away anywhere. They were exactly sat down in middle-aged lives of people, given their lives, live with their lives. Although it is very interesting and very humanizing, there's not a lot of pow going on. Pow pow. On top of that, as we talked about, the cover doesn't look very adult. It looks like more of a young adult cover, so the people that are picking it up aren't necessarily the target market, although it is a beautiful cover. And lastly, The Immortalists. As a title, I don't entirely feel like it represents the book, personally. It does tie in that is The Immortalist is the magician's act that I believe it was the grandma of all of the gold children from the story performed and died, and Klara chose to kill herself with. And because this is a novel trying to generally grasp and discuss life and death and the various aspects of those things, ending on the image of Ruby, Clara's daughter, performing a magic act herself. It comes full circle down the line. The Immortalists, they've all touched one another. They've lived through this family line, and this is the end product. It works, but again, it's a little bit too punchy, don't you think? It sounds like a superhero group for a novel that was so absolutely rooted in reality and compelling because of that. So I thought, because these were my general tweaks on how I would have presented the Immortalists, I wouldn't change anything about the writing in the book per se. I would more change or tweak the representation of the book to others so they go in with the appropriate mindset and then can fully enjoy it for what it is. So I thought it would be a little bit of a fun thing to do since I'm trying to do more creative things while I'm talking during my videos. I'm going to redesign the cover for the Immortalists as I think it better represents the story. Hello, this is Editing Slaidey here. My original intention with remaking the cover for the Immortalists was to genuinely take a bunch of actual pictures and Photoshop them because I feel like adult covers are typically more photorealistic, if not actual photos. However, at first my Photoshop did not want to capture what was going on the main screen, and it would just show what was on the side screen, and then after the fact, I realized I am completely terrible at putting together actual photos. So, in the end, what's going to play during this video is going to be a concept of what I thought the Immortalists cover should have looked like, but I want you to take the concept of what I scribbled down very, very quickly. I probably got this out in just about how fast the mouse is moving on the screen is about how fast I was drawing it. So take the concept of what I'm drawing and try to imagine that as something that is actually photorealistic and made out of real photos. I'm sorry that I don't have enough time to pour into making a very proper cover right now. I have a lot of other videos that I want to get started on that I'm much more passionate about. As always, I would just like to thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to support me, there are links to my Patreon, my Buy Me a Coffee, Ko-fi, all of that in the description below. If you've read The Immortalists, let me know how you felt about it. There was definitely a wider range of interpretations and reactions to The Immortalists, which is why I decided to try to play devil's advocate and see it from both sides of the spectrum that I was seeing from the reviews. So let me know which one you fall under. If you agree, disagree, anything at all, give me a comment, and I would be happy for the conversation. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.